Are you telling me right now? And I'll throw it up there. I'll put a poll up on Instagram to vote on who looks older. But I don't think you're going to be happy with the results.
I think that you look significantly older than me.
I'm Justin Lesko, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu brown belt and former pro MMA fighter.
And I'm Mike Callahan, a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu brown belt and a law enforcement officer.
Coming up on the show today, we're feeling inspired by the 5 overtime game between the Lightning and the Blue Jackets in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we're looking at our longest marathon training sessions.
We're also going to talk about our favorite training sessions and take aim at breaking a world record.
In other words, I'm trying to kill Mike with cardio. Welcome to that Jiu Jitsu podcast. Obviously, Mike Callahan's hockey knowledge is not really up.
It's on the up.
It's not where I think it should be, but I'm assuming you did not watch the 5 overtime marathon game between Tampa and Columbus. So 5 overtimes means they played 8 periods, which is
so one period in hockey is 20 minutes, correct?
Correct. And when you get to the playoffs, it becomes, quote unquote, golden goal in the overtime. The first team to score wins.
Okay.
And they play 5-on-5, just like the regulation time, and they do 20-minute periods, just like regulation. So they essentially played 2 2/3 hockey games last night. The game obviously set record for 6th longest game, but also Seth Jones, who's one of the players for Columbus that you don't know of, that you can't name. He set the record for most minutes played in a hockey game by a single player, and he played 65 minutes of hockey in that game. So
what position does he play?
He's a defenseman. So he played more minutes than there are in a regular 3-period hockey game by himself.
Do the defensemen switch as often as the forwards switch?
No, the defensemen typically play more minutes than forwards do. Seth Jones averages about 25 minutes a game, so he played 2.5 times as much hockey in one game than he's used to doing. So that really got me thinking into what would that mean in jiu-jitsu terms if you had to compete as much in one session as they did in that game.
So Hickson, was it, that used to have those matches? Or
like the
Elio Gracie and
the Hoist Gracie Sakuraba fight was like 90 minutes in Pride, right?
Yeah. Modern jiu-jitsu, I remember Lloyd Irvin not a couple years ago, probably about 7 years ago now, did that brown belt Kumite, which was no time limit, sub only, which was, some of those, it was when Gary Tonin was a brown belt. He was in there. Keenan, AJ Agazarm, Sean Roberts, who else? AJ Souza, Luke Costello, so they were killers, and they did gi and no gi, I think an 8-man bracket, and they had some long matches in there, 50, 60 minutes. But I guess the most notable one was Keenan and Gordon went, I think, close to an hour recently. So
that was a couple years ago, right?
I shouldn't say recently. It was before. It was in 2017, before Gordon won the ADCC.
Who won that match? I remember watching that match because I remember it was they streamed it on Facebook or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they were streaming it, and then the stream got fucked up, and then they found another way to stream it. Gordon won by heel hook.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and then Gordon won the rematch in the finals of the 88 kilo division at Abu Dhabi. He won that by guillotine. So,
well, I was looking at sort of extrapolating into ADCC or IBJJF World Championships, just the longest possible ways that things could go, right? So in ADCC, you need 4 wins to win the title.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do the same ratio of how long the 5 overtimes was compared to a regular game, and you use 4 wins in ADCC, you'd have to do 10.64 matches. So we can just round that up to 11. So you'd have to win 11 matches to win an ADCC title. ADCC, they do 10-minute matches and a 5-minute overtime in the qualifying rounds, and they do 20-minute matches with a 10-minute overtime in the finals. So if you went to overtime for every single match, that would be 180 minutes or 3 hours of competing at ADCC to win a title.
Yeah.
So just looking
Against
purely at the ratio and the math, that's a lot of fucking rolling in one tournament.
Yeah, right. It is, but those guys didn't play 8 periods straight, like the most minutes that were played. So 8 periods is what 160 minutes, and the most that somebody played in there was 65 minutes, which is still a shit ton
But
of
again,
ice time.
But that's typical for that sport. So it's typical for that sport to play not every single minute of the game, and it's typical in jiu-jitsu that you do roll every minute of the match. So you're still extrapolating out like either way, it's a long fucking time.
Yeah, I agree. It's crazy.
Do you remember any particular training sessions yourself that went really, really long?
I've had some marathons with Brian White.
Brian White. I was gonna bring up Brian White too. Man, this is a good episode for Brian White.
I've had some marathons with Brian White. When we used to do the morning classes at Revolution, like I remember you and I going 30, 45 minutes sometimes. Yeah, I mean those are the ones that stick out the most in my mind.
Yeah, I've had plenty of classes where we got done training, and I would pull Brian White and say, "Yo, do you want to go just sub only?" And they'd go 20, 30, 40 minutes, and you get to the point where it's like, if this roll kills me, I'm okay with it because I'm just nonstop going as hard as I can.
Those are always like, obviously you're not going to get rolls like that inside of like a structured class. So those are always the rolls like when him and I would meet up at work and train. Like sometimes we set a timer, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we'll just start flow rolling and we don't stop. We'll just, kind of transition like seamlessly into a regular roll and we'll go from there.
I do think there is a real benefit to starting a roll with no clock on and just letting it go and not having. Sometimes it's nice not to be able to look up at the clock and say, all right, another minute left, I just have to survive. Like sometimes it's that good feeling of I'm going to go as hard as I can for as long as I can to try to get the most out of this roll.
Yeah, I see that too. I see the benefits of that. I do think that working with a clock, I like that a little bit better. Just because, you have a set, you can kind of train yourself to push for a set time, which is, you don't know, like when you're rolling no time limit, I know people swear by no time limit, but just for the purposes of training, I think in order to, work up to like your full potential in terms of your gas tank, working with a clock and starting low and moving up is the way to go.
Yeah, I think it's like anything. Like, I don't want to only train sub only no time limit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to only do 5-minute goes and a 1-minute rest in between. I want to have varied training, just like everything. You don't go to the gym and only bench press or only squat. No one goes in squats.
When you're getting the shit kicked out of you, sometimes a clock is your ally.
Well, there's something to be said too about the longer the match goes, or the longer the round goes, and the more tired you get, the more reliant you become on really good technique. You can't explode as well. You can't muscle out of things. I think there's a level of technique that you don't really get to work on until you're 35 minutes deep and exhausted.
It's crazy.
And still pushing yourself. There's also a mental element of just forcing yourself to keep going, and it's really easy to stop a match by tap real quick and just be done. I think you have to push yourself sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely benefits of it. It just gets crazy. I always like there's days where like Brian and I will train at work, and it just, like the one day I set the clock for 20 minutes, and then we just, you just keep going. And like I said, some days we won't even set a clock, and the next thing you know, it's 30, 40 minutes, and it's just a battle of wills at that point. It's like, I'm not fucking, like, you can take my arm, I'm not. So
Yeah, eventually you
yeah,
cross over a threshold where it's like, I've rolled this long, I'm not getting tapped by something silly here. Like I've gone this long, I'm committed to I'm giving it my all for as long as I can go.
right,
I'm not tapping to get out of here.
right,
But
yeah.
again, I might be a little different in my approach. Speaking of getting tapped by something silly, do you remember the time that you were most mad at me in the whole world? Do you know what story I'm going to tell?
Yeah, is it the triangle?
The Callahan
Like with
Triangle.
yeah, with the triangle with the Bravo grip.
It was, your brain processes things really quickly. And I tapped you, and you stood up, and part of me was like, oh, that was cool. And then you started to walk away. So for like 1 second, I was like, okay, he's just collecting himself. And then I think you threatened to kill my whole family. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I think he's
I
joking. And then I was like,
mm,
oh, he's really mad. And then I was like, oh, he's coming back, and he might actually kill me for the rest of this 3-minute
yeah,
round.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, I wouldn't kill your family. I like your family.
You notice he didn't say he wouldn't kill me. Just pointing that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you want to know something? Like that's like the thing that annoys me the most when training with people is when they do stupid shit. Not that you're doing stupid shit like that's, but when people do stupid shit that really isn't a jujitsu move, and typically you'll get people who are new to the game that'll do this, and they'll do stupid shit, and it's reckless, and it has a high propensity to injure you. Like, I can't deal with that. Like, it just, like, they're just, I don't know what's going through their mind, but occasionally you'll run into, you know, higher level guys that'll do that shit, and it's like, what's going through your mind? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Is winning a role in a practice room that important to you? I have no time for that. And because like I if like I compete, but like I have a day job, like I understand, and as do you, like I have a life outside of jujitsu. So, you know, if I'm not respectful to people, how can I expect people to be respectful to me?
Sure.
That's not saying I don't train hard, but if I'm giving you the respect of not trying to fucking hurt you,
Yeah.
I'm just asking the same.
I was thinking, marathon hockey game, marathon jiu-jitsu. I wonder if there's a world record for longest like continuous roll or longest training session. Like
It has to be days, right?
it's not as much as you would think, and I really think that we could break this record. All right. It was
Okay.
now the only thing I could find on the Google machine was from 2019. All right. So if
Okay.
something's happened since then, let us know in the comments or send me a message. But a guy named Damien Todd from Australia, he rolled for 24 straight hours in 2019, and it was like to raise money for like a suicide prevention charity. I think he was in the Marines in Australia. If he wasn't, I'm sorry, you can correct me. He rolled 24 hours. He had like almost 200 different partners who came in like for 5 minutes at a time. I I think 24 hours. I think that's doable.
Like he didn't eat or drink for 24 hours and he was just training. Like that seems like
Now you would think
I
that there
need
would
to
be more information provided
I
about
need to
this,
know
but there I
if
could
I
not
can
find
take
anything.
if I can take water breaks, if I can take water breaks and I can if I can take water breaks and I can eat something, I'm on board with going after this thing.
I saw he did a post on Reddit in the lead up to him trying this 24-hour record. And one of the comments he had said was he was talking to the Guinness World Record people and he wanted like a 4 minute break like every couple hours or an hour every hour. Like there was some small break built in. I don't know if that's how it played out because there was more information about the lead up to it than there was after he'd actually done it. And the only thing that was out there about him completing it was like a local news story about, this guy had done this big
All
24-hour
right.
thing. So I think if we can get like 5 minutes every 3 hours where you get a drink,
Yep.
eat a banana, take a pee. I think 24 hours we could do that for a charity. I think we can make that happen.
I just don't know if we're going to be able, like we would have to get 50 people.
Yes.
We
And they'd
would
have to
have to get
work in
50
shifts.
people.
Like they couldn't all stay there for 24 hours. You'd have to have like shift work. A group of 3 groups of 20 maybe who are there for 6 to 8 hours at a time and rotate in and out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right, I'm on board.
all right, I see it playing out like this. We have a mat, and you and I will be like side by side on the mat. And we'll just have a
Mm-hmm.
fresh guy come in, and we'll do like 5 minute goes with a 1 minute rest or whatever the Guinness people allow us. And I think we try to go for like 25 hours. Let's break it by like an hour.
Okay.
Like
I'm good with that.
once all this COVID stuff's done, obviously we can't break this tomorrow, but I think we can do it. If anybody listening knows Damian Todd, get him to get in contact with us because I want to talk to him about how he did it. He was also 48 years old when he did this in 2019, so he's only a few years younger than you. So if he can do it, you can do it.
Bro, we're literally the same age. We're literally the same age, and you look, no bullshit, significantly older than I do. Significantly older than I do. If we stood next to each other, they would be like, "Oh, that's nice because you do the podcast with your older cousin."
Are you telling me right now? And I'll throw it up there. I'll put a poll up on Instagram to vote on who looks older, but I don't think you're going to be happy with the results.
I think that you look significantly older than me.
Well, there's only one way to settle this. All right, so let's talk more practical training sessions. Not
Yeah.
marathons, not sub only, no time limit. Obviously,
Yeah.
we know no one likes the warm ups. So if you're building your dream session, do you even include the warm ups?
No, and you want to know something? I just think that I don't like static stretching. I like static stretching after a workout, right?
Stretching where you hold a position for
Right. I don't
30
like
seconds.
that to start. And there's been studies that have been put out recently that say that actually puts you at higher risk to pull something.
You know what? I'm actually glad that you said that because there was a 2011 study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, which, one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, obviously it's on the bestsellers list.
And they concluded in designing effective warm up routines for athletes requiring strength, speed, or power, coaches and strength and conditioning professionals should prescribe a general aerobic warm up followed by dynamic stretching that increases muscle temperature and blood flow while providing the opportunity for sport specific movement rehearsal. Static stretching immediately before activity should be avoided.
Yeah. Because you're cold and you're really not doing anything and you're just putting stress on everything. I like dynamic warm-ups. I don't think that, and I don't know if I'm in the minority on this, but, I don't like the elbow escapes and I don't,
I like that because it's sport specific. I like that because it's sport specific.
But there's a time where you can drill that. So, like a dynamic warm up on your own and then get into it. Here's the other thing. This is like the third time that I've been talking about this documentary, but whoever hasn't seen this Daisy Fresh documentary on Flow Grappling should go watch it. But prior to them releasing that documentary, they put out like a short, like 6-7 minute video on YouTube. And Heath Pedigo, who is the owner of Daisy Fresh, and he's the head coach for Pedigo Submission Fighting, which is the team that fights out of Daisy Fresh Laundromat. He said that, like, when he gets a guy who comes in, it's not like he pulls them off to the side and like goes over arm bars from the guard. Like, they get thrown into the fire right away. I think there's something to be said about that. And he says that every night when you go in there, it's like balls to the wall competition training, like hardcore, like either sparring or positional sparring, and it's just high paced. He said if you want to drill, the gym's open all day for you to come in and drill, techniques. So that's so the guys essentially, go in there during the day and then they drill, and then their nighttime classes are just they're grueling from what it looks like on in these videos.
So the basic model of most jiu-jitsu classes is class starts, you do jog, you do elbow escapes and butterfly guard pulls and other break falls, like sport specific stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then an instructor teaches technique, you drill the technique, maybe a second technique, you drill that technique, and then you roll. You're saying you would rather, instead of having drilling, do like positional sparring where someone starts in the mount, someone starts in the back, do
Right.
that, and then do regular, normal jiu-jitsu sparring.
Yep. Then you're going.
That's your
And
dream
then,
class.
yeah. And then, opening up the gym for, um, you know, technique drilling and, whatever. But like,
Making
I
drilling
think,
more your own responsibility, like coming to the gym at your own time and drill.
yeah. And I mean, like, if it was my gym, I would have, the place I'm at now it's staffed all the time with instructors.
But who's teaching new students the techniques to drill?
Yeah, beginners classes and stuff.
Oh, you're talking more like advanced class. You don't want to drill in
Yeah.
advanced class.
You asked me like what my dream class
That's fair.
is.
You're
You know
right.
what I
You're right.
mean? So, and there are beginners classes and everything, which are beneficial, but like that's the problem with like a curriculum, because if you come in the middle of it, like you're just,
But it's the
I'm
same
okay,
thing
but
as it's the same thing as Daisy Fresh, where you're getting thrown in. You're getting.
that's yeah. I shouldn't say that's the problem with the curriculum. Like that's just it is what it is. Like you just come in the middle of it and you go. Um, I don't know if like I don't know. I see the pros and cons to both of them.
Yeah.
Like I see like how you're not letting people roll or you're not letting people spar, but
I mean,
I
I
don't know.
think that there's, for a beginner class, I think the normal structure I outlined earlier of warm up, drill, roll.
Yeah.
I think when you get to an advanced class, I agree that maybe less time spent drilling, and I think positional sparring should be a lead into traditional sparring. So maybe 3 or 4 rounds of positional, and then right into normal sparring. But I actually like dynamic warm up. I feel better training if I've had like 10 or 15 minutes. I kind of go the opposite way on warm ups as most people. Most people don't like the warm ups. I wish that I had more time to actually warm up myself. I would take 15 minutes to do a good dynamic warm up because I'm like a sports nerd, I guess.
Right.
I feel more activated. I feel less injury prone. I feel like I recover more easily when I'm done if I have done a good dynamic warm up. I like drilling. I obviously like learning new technique. So it's tough to find that marriage of like I want to learn new technique from people who are
Yeah,
better than
I
me,
like
but
to be like if I'm competing, and obviously this is different than practice, but I like to be sweating when I go onto the mat.
I hate the first roll when I'm not sweating. And that's part
Yeah.
of my least favorite thing about doing super fights, like Fight to Win.
Yeah, there's
Starting a
no
roll when I'm not sweating, you can warm up like backstage as much as you want. Honestly, the best way for me to do like a super fight or a tournament would be if I had 2 or 3 full on 5 minute rounds, and then my fourth go was like my competition go. I
yeah.
don't I don't do well with like starting not sweating.
And that's the bitch of it. Like you're trying to time it because you don't want to get too tired. But like those fight to win matches, they're 7, 8, 9 minute matches. Like you can do that standing on your head, like 1, 7, 8, or 9 minute match. Like that's fine. So, yeah, like it's the tournaments that get you. Like when you're fighting 5 or 6 times and you're trying to find that like middle ground where you can go out there like warmed up, but you still want to have that energy, in the tank for if you have to fight 5 or 6 times. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'd much rather go on there, step on the mat, dripping wet with sweat, than go on ice cold and have to use 75% of that first match to get loose. So
yeah. Well, when I remember I had at one point when I was training, I was working at a bank, and I would get done work at like the same time class started. So by the time I got to the class, it was like people were rolling already. Like it
yep.
just was not a good setup. And I got a lot of, I don't want to say injuries, but like muscle strains and pulls because I would get to the academy and I would just dive in. I didn't have a chance to get
Yeah.
a good sweat and start training and start rolling. And ever since then, I really realized the benefit of really getting a good warm up and a good sweat in just for the sake of injury prevention.
And that's another thing too about drilling. Like my approach to drilling is like if I start drilling a technique, like the first rep that I drill after it's taught is like so slow. It's like incremental, like basic, like movement, just so slow. But by the end of it, by the time that they're ready to call time and show something else, like I'm going full speed through it. So
Yeah,
I use the drilling as like a warm up to the rolling too.
yeah. But we talked about a little bit earlier about like memorable, really long training sessions we've had. Is there
Yeah.
any training session you've had that was memorable for other reasons, like something that sticks out when you think back over a decade of jiu-jitsu, anything that pops out to you?
You want to know something like one of the best parts about jujitsu is just like the network, right? So it's like regardless of where you go, you can always just find a school, and I've just had a lot of positive experiences at like other schools, like traveling all over the place, and always packing my gi and just dropping into schools. Um, I've never really had a negative experience at a school, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Um, I always like those training sessions too because there's an element of it that like it almost feels like you're going to a competition, because you don't know anybody in there, you don't know how they roll, you don't know how it's going to be. So
You're rolling against people who don't see your game every day. So it's a real
right,
test of does my stuff really work or
yep,
does it not?
yep, and so that's my thing. I always like dropping in at other people's places. What about you?
Well, I remember I was thinking about this earlier, obviously is why I asked you about it. There's a few for me that stand out. One was I was a white belt and it was like 2 weeks before my very first amateur MMA fight, and we were doing like, all right, this is the fight, like in the cage. You're basically doing like not fight simulation because it wasn't like pad work. It was sparring, but MMA. And I remember like I really got out grappled so bad by Rizzo and Reef Snyder and Anthony and all dudes who A outrank me and B, regardless of rank, are just better than I am. And I
Right.
remember like my confidence was like really shaken. I'm like, man, I gotta fight someone in 2 weeks, and I just got fucked up. And Anthony said to me, he was like, yeah, you lose here so that you don't lose there. And when I had that like perspective switch a little bit, I realized like this dude is not as good as those guys, and I survived when they did that, so I'm gonna be fine in this fight. And I was, and I won. But like that really like was one of my first as a white belt. These guys are not holding back, and they're giving me the business, and I like it stands out to me. I remember it like very vividly.
Yeah. Yeah, I always like kind of found some comfort in knowing that those guys were as good as they were. Like you're going to have a hell of a time finding somebody that's faster than Rizzo out there, Like Rizzo, the way that he just changed shit together is, I don't know anymore, but like when he was when he was fighting, it was incredible how fast he moved. Um,
Yeah,
and Anthony's the same way. Anthony's, for a big guy. Anthony, moves really well, and he's strong for his size. Um, Brian White's a technician, and then I've said it before. Reef Snyder's probably one of the best guys I've ever rolled with. So like I always fell back on knowing that like if I can hang with these guys, I'm all right. So
yeah. There was a couple training sessions where we would do just pure cage work, standing grappling against the cage, and they felt like marathons, but it might have just been 20 minutes. Go for 5, get 30 seconds off.
right,
But getting a fresh guy like every 2 minutes, and it
yeah,
was you either had your back against the cage and you had to grapple your way out, or you were pushing someone against the cage and you had to keep them there. And I don't have like a specific one night of that happening because we did that a lot, But that was one of the most grueling parts, I think, about MMA training was that
Oh yeah.
that cage work and just grinding, and like that shows you who you really are, because it's not just jiu-jitsu. You're also standing up, and if you get lazy, someone will punch you in the face. So those were like, I know you have to be a little weird to enjoy wanting to be a fighter, but like those
Just
were always
embrace
the most.
grind.
It's weird to say, but those were like the most fun, awful,
Yeah.
hard rounds.
Yeah, I agree.
I always notice too that the first time I train after I get promoted, I always feel like that is like a memorable session, because it's the first time you're wearing like a new belt, and even though you're training with the same people that you trained with the day before when you were one belt lower, you feel like you have to prove a little bit that you deserve that belt.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of a different intensity now where, I remember after I got promoted to brown belt, like guys who went from blue belt to purple belt and I went from purple belt to brown belt, they come at you hard because, they see that the next belt that you are wearing is like where their next step is.
They're trying. Yep.
Yeah, those are always good training sessions too. And I love the training sessions where I didn't get promoted, but somebody else did. You know what I mean? And it's their first role as a purple belt.
Oh,
their
yeah.
first role as a brown
Yep.
belt. Like those are so fun. Those are so fun.
Yeah, I enjoy promotions. I do.
Yeah, not just because we get to whip people when they run the gauntlet, but I love seeing people get promoted. It's awesome. You played a part in their journey. You know what I mean? You were involved in their promotion because you trained with them every day.
Yep.
So it's cool to see people get better after, you've had a lot of back and forth with them.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget that you can catch the live version of every episode on YouTube. If you want to follow the show on Instagram, you can find it at that_jujitsu_podcast. And if you want to follow me directly, you can find me at m_Callahan106.
If you want to follow me directly, you can find me at Justin Lesko. Don't forget, we're still giving away a free t-shirt if you subscribe to follow us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/thatjujitsupodcast. And there's a couple different tiers that have different bonus content, and you get technique breakdowns, you get different instructionals. So check it out, patreon.com/thatjujitsupodcast, and get yourself a free t-shirt. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.